The Calm Mind, written and published by Books Reader. We live in a world that glorifies thinking. From a young age, we are taught that careful analysis and deep contemplation are essential for success and avoiding mistakes. While thoughtful consideration has its place, many of us take it to an extreme, falling into the exhausting habit of overthinking. Ironically, rather than enhancing our effectiveness and happiness, overthinking diminishes both. At its core, overthinking stems from our fundamental need to control our environment and outcomes. When faced with uncertainty or challenges, our minds instinctively generate endless scenarios, analyze potential problems, and attempt to prepare for every possible situation. This mental activity creates an illusion of control, making us feel as though we are taking productive steps towards solving problems or preventing difficulties. However, this constant mental churn is often a misguided effort to create certainty in a world that is inherently uncertain. Life, by nature, contains elements beyond our control or prediction. Yet our minds struggle to accept this reality, resorting to excessive thinking as a form of psychological self-defense. We believe that if we analyze something long enough, we can prevent negative outcomes or guarantee positive ones. This pattern becomes particularly apparent when making important decisions or navigating significant life changes. Rather than acting on the information available, we become trapped in analysis paralysis, convinced that more thinking will eventually reveal the perfect solution. We mentally replay situations, examine every angle, and seek unattainable certainty before taking action. Paradoxically, the more we try to control life through relentless analysis, the less control we actually have. Overthinking pulls us away from the present moment, making us less engaged in our daily lives, less responsive to opportunities, and less decisive. It drains our mental energy, weakens our emotional resilience, and hampers our ability to act effectively. This cycle is further reinforced by our brain's reward system. Each time we believe we have uncovered a new perspective through overanalysis, we experience a fleeting sense of satisfaction, a false sense of progress. This reinforcement creates a subtle addiction to thinking itself, making us mistake mental activity for genuine problem solving. Recognizing this dynamic is the first step toward breaking free from the cycle of overthinking. Understanding that excessive analysis is often a form of avoidance rather than true problem solving helps loosen its grip. While our minds will always generate thoughts and scenarios, we can learn to see them for what they are, attempts to control the uncontrollable. The key lies in developing a new relationship with uncertainty. Instead of overthinking our way to absolute certainty, we must learn to act with wisdom while accepting that some unknowns will always exist. This doesn't mean disregarding thoughtful consideration entirely, but rather striking a balance, combining reasonable analysis with action and acceptance. The next time you find yourself stuck in an overthinking spiral, remember that your mind is simply trying to protect you in the only way it knows how. With this awareness, you can step back from endless analysis and ask yourself, what action or acceptance would serve me best right now? True control does not come from exhaustive mental preparation but from the ability to respond skillfully to life as it unfolds. This chapter marks the beginning of your journey toward a calmer, clearer mind. As we progress through this book, you will learn practical techniques to recognize and release overthinking patterns, reclaiming the mental energy currently consumed by excessive analysis. The goal is not to eliminate thinking but to think in a way that serves you rather than exhausts you. Lesson 1. Worry and anxiety stem from imagined futures. Our minds possess a remarkable ability to time travel, projecting us into imagined futures filled with endless possibilities. While this capacity has helped humanity plan, innovate, and survive, it also becomes a significant source of suffering when left unchecked. Much of our anxiety and worry arise from living in these imagined futures rather than experiencing the present moment. Think about how often your worries materialize exactly as you imagine them. The truth is, most of our anxious predictions never come to pass, yet we spend countless hours mentally rehearsing worst-case scenarios as if they were inevitable. As a result, we experience the emotional burden of difficulties that haven't even happened, and may never happen at all. This tendency creates a paradox. Instead of facing challenges once, we live through them repeatedly in our minds. The problem becomes even more pronounced because our future projections are based on incomplete information. When we speculate about the future, we can only use our current knowledge and experiences, even though circumstances are constantly evolving. This leads to anxiety built on outdated or inaccurate assumptions, causing us to prepare for scenarios that become increasingly unlikely over time. Additionally, when we are constantly focused on the future, we create a state of perpetual dissatisfaction with the present. By fixating on what might happen, we overlook the peace, stability, and resources available in the now. This gap between imagination and reality is further exacerbated by our mind's tendency to catastrophize, defaulting to worst-case scenarios under the guise of being prepared. However, rather than equipping us to handle challenges, this habit simply reinforces anxiety, making threats appear more numerous and severe than they actually are. The solution lies in cultivating present-moment awareness. This does not mean abandoning all future planning but rather approaching it from a grounded state of reality. When we anchor ourselves in the present, we can make clearer decisions based on actual circumstances rather than anxiety-driven speculation. The present moment contains real, tangible resources that are far more valuable than endless mental rehearsals of hypothetical situations. Right now, you have access to your breath, your senses, your ability to think rationally, and your capacity to take action. These tools are infinitely more effective in navigating life than dwelling on uncertain futures. Perhaps the most profound realization is this: anxiety requires future thinking to survive. When we fully immerse ourselves in the present, we often find that, in this very moment, everything is actually okay. The overwhelming problems we imagine shrink into manageable challenges when viewed through the lens of reality. Developing present-moment awareness takes practice. Our minds naturally wander into the future, but we can train ourselves to recognize when this happens and gently return to the now. This might involve focusing on physical sensations, fully engaging in current tasks, or simply observing our surroundings with curiosity. As we strengthen our ability to stay present, we begin to trust ourselves to handle life as it unfolds. Instead of exhausting ourselves by living through countless imagined versions of the future, we learn to respond with clarity, resilience, and confidence in the present. We discover that our presence of mind in the current moment is our most valuable resource for dealing with whatever the future may bring. By recognizing that worry and anxiety arise from living in imagined futures, we can choose to return to the present moment whenever we notice our mind spinning forward. This simple but powerful shift allows us to experience the natural calm and clarity that exists beneath our anxious projections, leading to a more grounded and peaceful way of living. Lesson 2: Mental loops persist because your brain mistakes activity for protection. Our brains evolved with one primary directive: keep us alive. This survival mechanism served us well throughout human history, constantly scanning for threats and preparing responses to potential dangers. In our modern world, however, this protective instinct often manifests as persistent thought loops that masquerade as helpful mental activity but actually create unnecessary stress and anxiety. These mental loops operate on a fundamental misunderstanding within our brain's protective systems. When we encounter a concern or potential threat, our brain believes that thinking about it repeatedly is a form of protection. It's as if our mind reasons that if we keep the threat under constant surveillance through continuous thought, we'll be better prepared when danger strikes. This biological response made sense when threats were primarily physical and immediate, but it becomes problematic when applied to modern challenges like relationship issues, career decisions, or financial concerns. The brain interprets this constant mental activity as productive work, similar to a security guard making continuous rounds. Each time we revisit a worry or concern, our brain registers it as active protection, reinforcing the belief that this repetitive thinking is keeping us safe. This creates a self-perpetuating cycle where the very act of thinking becomes mistaken for problem-solving or preparation. Consider how your mind reacts when you're worried about an upcoming presentation. The brain, believing it's helping, replaces various scenarios repeatedly. What might go wrong, how people might react, potential questions that could arise. This mental activity feels productive because it's engaging and energy intensive, but it's often just your brain running in circles, mistaking motion for progress. This protection mechanism becomes particularly problematic because it creates a false sense of control. When we're caught in these thought loops, we feel like we're doing something about our concerns even though we're actually just recycling the same thoughts without generating new insights or solutions. The brain's mistake is thinking that more thought equals better preparation when in reality, it often leads to mental exhaustion and decreased effectiveness. Understanding this mechanism is crucial because it helps us recognize that these persistent thought loops aren't serving their intended purpose. Just as a security system that constantly triggers false alarms becomes more hindrance than help, our mind's overactive protection mechanism can interfere with our ability to think clearly and respond effectively to real challenges. The key to breaking free from these mental loops lies in recognizing them for what they are, an outdated protection mechanism that's working over time. When we understand that our brain is simply trying to keep us safe, we can begin to respond more skillfully to these thought patterns. Instead of getting caught up in the loop, we can acknowledge our brain's protective intent while choosing not to engage with every repeated thought. Developing this awareness allows us to distinguish between productive thinking and unnecessary mental cycling. We can learn to recognize when our thoughts are actually moving us toward solutions versus when they're simply running in protective circles. This recognition is the first step in establishing new mental habits that better serve our modern needs. One effective approach is to notice when you're caught in a mental loop and gently remind yourself that this repetitive thinking isn't actually providing protection. Just as you would calibrate an oversensitive alarm system, you can begin to adjust your brain's threshold for what requires extended mental attention. This doesn't mean ignoring legitimate concerns but rather addressing them more efficiently without getting caught in unnecessary thought cycles. Consider each thought loop as a well-intentioned but misguided guardian. By acknowledging its protective purpose while choosing not to engage with its repetitive patterns, you can begin to establish a more balanced relationship with your thinking mind. This understanding creates space for more productive mental activity and allows your natural state of calm to emerge from beneath the chaos of constant mental activity. Lesson 3: Problems grow when you feed them attention, starve them with presence. Have you ever noticed how a small worry can snowball into an overwhelming concern simply because you keep thinking about it? This phenomenon illustrates a fundamental truth about our mental landscape. What we feed with attention grows stronger. Just as a plant thrives with water and sunlight, our problems expand and intensify when we continuously direct our mental energy toward them. The human mind has an extraordinary capacity for problem solving, but this same ability can become our greatest obstacle when misapplied. When we fixate on a problem, we unknowingly create neural pathways that strengthen that particular thought pattern. Each time we revisit a worry or concern, we reinforce these pathways, making it increasingly difficult to break free from the cycle of negative thinking. This process becomes particularly problematic because our attention acts as a magnifying glass. What starts as a minor concern can appear massive and insurmountable after hours of focused worry. We begin to notice related issues, connect unrelated events to our worry, and create elaborate scenarios of potential negative outcomes. The problem hasn't actually grown, but our perception of it has expanded dramatically due to our sustained attention. The solution lies in understanding and applying the principle of presence. When we anchor ourselves in the present moment, we naturally withdraw attention from our problems. This isn't about ignoring legitimate concerns that need addressing. Rather, it's about recognizing when our attention has become excessive and counterproductive. Presence acts as a natural antidote to overthinking because it redirects our mental energy from imagined scenarios back to current reality. Think of your attention as a limited resource, much like money in a bank account. Every moment spent dwelling on a problem is an investment that could potentially yield negative returns. Instead of continuously feeding your problems with attention, you can choose to invest that mental energy in the present moment where real solutions often emerge naturally. The practice of presence involves bringing your awareness to your immediate experience, the sensations in your body, the sounds around you, your breath moving in and out. This simple act of paying attention to what's actually happening rather than what your mind says might happen creates a shift in your mental landscape. Problems that seemed overwhelming begin to lose their grip when you stop feeding them with constant attention. Developing this skill requires patience and practice. Start by noticing when your mind is caught in problem-focused thinking. Rather than trying to force these thoughts away, gently redirect your attention to something concrete in your present experience. This might be the feeling of your feet on the ground, the texture of your clothing, or the temperature of the air around you. Each time you make this shift, you're literally starving the problem of the attention it needs to grow. Problems don't always require immediate solutions. Sometimes, the best approach is to let them be while maintaining presence in your current experience. This creates space for natural solutions to emerge and prevents the exhausting cycle of mental proliferation that occurs when we overfocus on our concerns. The relationship between attention and problem growth is particularly evident in social anxiety and interpersonal conflicts. When we obsess over a challenging interaction or upcoming social situation, we often create additional layers of complexity that didn't exist initially. By staying present and attending to what's actually happening rather than our thoughts about what might happen, we naturally reduce the power these situations hold over us. As you move through your day, practice recognizing where your attention goes. Notice how problems seem to shrink when you stop feeding them with constant mental energy. This isn't about suppressing or denying your challenges but about finding a more balanced way to relate to them. Through presence, you discover that many problems resolve themselves when you stop inflating them with excessive attention. Lesson 4: Your mind creates most suffering by rehearsing scenarios that never happen. The human mind possesses an extraordinary ability to imagine potential futures, yet this gift often becomes our greatest source of suffering. We spend countless hours mentally rehearsing situations that may never materialize, creating detailed scenarios of what could go wrong and experiencing genuine emotional distress over purely fictional events. This mental rehearsal isn't merely a passive activity. It actively shapes our emotional state and influences our behavior. When we repeatedly imagine negative scenarios, our brain processes these imagined events similarly to real experiences, triggering stress responses and anxiety. Your body doesn't always distinguish between a real threat and an imagined one, leading to physical symptoms of stress over situations that exist only in your mind. Consider how much time you spend preparing for conversations that never happen, anticipating disasters that never strike, or worrying about outcomes that never materialize. These mental rehearsals rarely serve a productive purpose. Instead, they create a cycle of anxiety and stress that depletes your emotional energy and prevents you from fully engaging with your actual life. The mind's tendency to create these scenarios stems from its primitive survival mechanism. In our evolutionary past, anticipating potential dangers helped keep us alive. However, in our modern world, this mechanism often misfires, creating excessive worry about social situations, professional challenges, or personal relationships that don't require such intense mental preparation. The solution lies not in trying to completely stop these mental rehearsals but in recognizing them for what they are. Stories we tell ourselves. When you catch yourself rehearsing negative scenarios, pause and ask yourself, is this actually happening right now? This simple question can break the spell of a maddened suffering and bring you back to present reality. Developing awareness of your mental rehearsals is crucial. Notice when you're creating detailed scenarios about future events. Are you imagining worst-case situations? Are you mentally scripting conversations? Are you repeatedly playing out potential conflicts? These are all forms of unnecessary suffering that drain your energy and peace of mind. Practice gently redirecting your attention when you notice these mental rehearsals. Instead of elaborating on imagined scenarios, focus on what's actually present in your life right now. What real challenges need your attention? What actual conversations need to happen? What concrete steps can you take to address genuine concerns? Your capacity for imagination is meant to serve you, not torment you. Use it constructively to envision positive possibilities and solutions rather than exhausting yourself with endless rehearsals of potential problems. When you find yourself caught in negative mental scenarios, remind yourself that you're creating these stories. They're not reality. By reducing the time spent on mental rehearsals, you free up enormous amounts of mental and emotional energy. This energy can be redirected toward meaningful activities, genuine problem solving, and actual experiences. Your life becomes richer and more fulfilling when you're not constantly preparing for imaginary disasters. The mind that creates suffering through endless rehearsals can also create peace through present moment awareness. Each time you catch yourself rehearsing negative scenarios, you have an opportunity to choose differently. You can choose to return to the present moment, to engage with real life rather than imagine problems, and to trust in your ability to handle situations as they actually arise, not as you fear they might. Lesson 5, Thoughts lose power when you realize they're suggestions, not commands. For most of our lives, we've operated under the assumption that our thoughts are absolute truths that must be obeyed. We experience a thought and immediately react to it as if it were a direct command from a superior authority. This automatic response to our thoughts has created a pattern where we've unknowingly given our thoughts complete control over our emotional state and actions. Consider how often you've experienced a thought like "I'm not good enough" or "this will never work out" and accepted it as an undeniable fact. These thoughts appear in our minds and we instinctively treat them as gospel truth, allowing them to dictate our mood, decisions, and behavior. But what if we've been misunderstanding the nature of thoughts all along? Thoughts are more like suggestions or proposals floating through our consciousness rather than authoritative commands. They're mental events that arise and pass much like clouds in the sky. Just as clouds don't control the sky itself, thoughts don't have to control our minds. This shift in perspective from viewing thoughts as commands to seeing them as mere suggestions can dramatically reduce their power over us. When we begin to observe our thoughts with this new understanding, we notice how arbitrary and often incorrect they can be. Our minds generate thousands of thoughts daily, many of which contradict each other or prove to be completely unfounded. One moment we might think everyone hates me, and the next I'm doing great. These can't all be commands worthy of our complete adherence. The process of reducing thought power starts with conscious observation. Watch your thoughts as they arise, but resist the immediate urge to accept them as truth. Instead, greet each thought with gentle curiosity. Ask yourself, is this thought actually true? Is it helpful? Do I need to act on this? This questioning process naturally weakens the automatic authority we've given to our thoughts. Our thoughts often masquerade as protective mechanisms, trying to keep us safe through worst-case scenario planning and excessive caution. While this intention might be noble, it frequently leads to unnecessary limitation and suffering. By recognizing thoughts as suggestions rather than commands, we can evaluate their actual utility rather than blindly following their direction. Creating distance between ourselves and our thoughts allows us to make conscious choices about which thoughts deserve our attention and action. This doesn't mean dismissing all thoughts. Some thoughts are indeed valuable and worth considering. The key is developing the discernment to recognize which thoughts serve us and which ones we can simply acknowledge and let pass. Practice treating thoughts like advice from an overly anxious friend, someone who cares about you but tends to catastrophize. You would listen to this friend with compassion but wouldn't necessarily follow all their suggestions. Apply this same approach to your thoughts. Acknowledge them, thank them for their input, but maintain your authority to decide whether to act on them. Building this new relationship with thoughts requires patience and consistent practice. Start by catching yourself when you're automatically obeying a thought. Pause and remind yourself that thoughts are suggestions, not commands. This simple act of pausing creates space for choice and reduces the thought's immediate power over you. As you develop this new understanding, you'll likely notice a natural decrease in anxiety and overthinking. When thoughts lose their absolute authority, they also lose their ability to create immediate emotional turmoil. You become more like a wise observer of your mental activity rather than its servant, able to choose which thoughts deserve your energy and which ones you can simply let float by. Your mind will continue generating thoughts. That's its nature. The goal isn't to stop thinking but to change your relationship with thoughts. By seeing them as suggestions rather than commands, you reclaim your power to choose which thoughts serve your well-being and which ones you can simply observe and release. Lesson 6. Anxiety feeds on your belief that constant thinking solves problems. When faced with challenges, our instinctive response is often to think harder, analyze more deeply, and mentally wrestle with the situation until we find a solution. We've been conditioned to believe that if we just think about something long enough, we'll eventually figure it out. This belief system creates a powerful feedback loop. We encounter a problem. We think about it extensively. Our anxiety grows and we respond by thinking even more intensively. The cycle continues feeding itself while simultaneously depleting our mental and emotional resources. This pattern persists because we've developed a fundamental misunderstanding about the relationship between thinking and problem solving. We've come to equate mental activity with productivity, convinced that more thinking must inevitably lead to better solutions. It's like believing that repeatedly opening and closing the refrigerator door will somehow make new food appear inside. The action feels purposeful, but it doesn't actually create results. The truth is that constant thinking often obscures solutions rather than revealing them. When we're caught in an anxiety-driven thought spiral, our mental energy becomes focused on the process of thinking itself rather than on genuine problem solving. We become like a computer running too many programs simultaneously. Our processing power gets consumed by background tasks, leaving little capacity for meaningful work. Our anxiety thrives on this misplaced faith in constant thinking because it creates an illusion of control. By maintaining a steady stream of thoughts about our problems, we feel like we're taking action even when we're simply recycling the same worries in different forms. This false sense of productivity keeps us engaged in the thinking cycle, preventing us from exploring more effective solutions that might lie in action, acceptance, or letting go. Consider how often your best solutions have come not during intense periods of analysis but during moments of mental clarity, perhaps while taking a shower, going for a walk, or just after waking up. These moments of insight typically arrive when our minds are relaxed and open, not when they're tight with anxiety and cluttered with repetitive thoughts. The path to breaking this cycle begins with recognizing that anxiety and excessive thinking are not helpful problem-solving tools but rather obstacles to finding real solutions. When we understand that our constant mental activity is actually a symptom of anxiety rather than a cure for it, we can begin to approach our challenges differently. Instead of immediately engaging in intense analysis when facing a problem, we can practice pausing and creating space around our thoughts. This doesn't mean avoiding thinking altogether but rather engaging in it more intentionally and effectively. We can learn to distinguish between productive problem-solving and anxiety-driven rumination. Developing alternative coping mechanisms is essential in this process. These might include taking concrete actions, however small, instead of just thinking about the problem. It could involve sharing our concerns with others to gain new perspectives or engaging in physical activities that help ground us in the present moment. Sometimes, the most powerful approach is simply acknowledging that not every problem requires immediate mental engagement. By gradually loosening our grip on the belief that constant thinking is necessary for problem solving, we create room for more effective approaches to emerge. We begin to trust that solutions can arise naturally when we allow our minds to settle into a more balanced state. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but with practice, we can learn to recognize when we're caught in anxiety-driven thinking, and choose different responses. The most profound solutions often emerge not from exhaustive analysis, but from a place of mental clarity and calm. When we stop feeding our anxiety with the belief that more thinking equals better outcomes, we create the conditions for genuine insights to surface naturally. This understanding allows us to approach our challenges with greater wisdom and less mental strain, leading to more effective solutions and a more peaceful state of mind. Lesson 7: Peace emerges when you stop treating every thought as important. Most of us have grown accustomed to giving equal weight to every thought that crosses our minds. We treat each passing idea, worry, or concern as if it demands our immediate and complete attention. This habit of treating all thoughts as equally important creates a mental environment where genuine peace becomes impossible to achieve. Consider how your mind works throughout a typical day. You might have a fleeting worry about an upcoming presentation followed by a reminder to buy groceries, then a memory of an awkward conversation from years ago, and suddenly a creative idea for a project. When we treat each of these thoughts as equally deserving of our attention and emotional energy, we create unnecessary mental turbulence. The key to finding peace lies in developing what we might call thought discretion, the ability to recognize that not every thought requires our engagement. Just as we don't need to answer every phone call or respond to every email immediately, we don't need to engage with every thought that appears in our consciousness. This doesn't mean suppressing or ignoring thoughts but rather developing the wisdom to discern which thoughts truly deserve our attention. Think of your mind as a busy marketplace. In this marketplace, various vendors' thoughts call out for your attention. Some offer valuable goods, productive thoughts. Others sell items you don't need, unnecessary worries. And a few might even try to sell you harmful products, destructive thoughts. A wise shopper doesn't stop at every stall or buy everything they see. Instead, They learn to navigate the marketplace selectively, choosing only what serves their genuine needs. When we begin to practice thought discretion, we naturally create space for peace to emerge. This space comes from the energy we save by not engaging with every passing thought. It's similar to decluttering a room. When we remove unnecessary items, we create a sense of spaciousness and calm. The same principle applies to our mental environment. The process of developing thought discretion starts with simple observation. Notice how many of your daily thoughts are actually relevant to your present moment or contribute meaningfully to your life. You might find that a significant portion of your mental activity consists of recycled worries, unnecessary planning, or repetitive thoughts that add no value to your experience. As you practice this observation, you'll begin to recognize patterns in your thinking. Some thoughts might feel heavy and demanding, while others feel light and transient. Some thoughts consistently lead to productive actions or insights while others merely create emotional turbulence. This awareness naturally leads to a more discerning relationship with your thoughts. The peace that emerges from this practice isn't a state of empty-mindedness or forced calm. Instead, it's a natural result of mental efficiency, using your cognitive energy wisely rather than dispersing it across every thought that appears. This peace feels like a background presence available even when you're engaging with important thoughts or solving real problems. Developing thought discretion also involves recognizing that importance often reveals itself through timing. A thought that seems urgent at 3 a.m. might lose its significance in the light of day. Learning to postpone engagement with thoughts that aren't immediately relevant helps maintain mental peace without neglecting genuine responsibilities. The ultimate goal isn't to create a rigid system of thought evaluation but to develop an intuitive sense of which thoughts deserve your attention. This intuition grows naturally as you practice observing your thoughts without immediately engaging with them. The resulting peace isn't something you need to create or maintain. It's your mind's natural state when it's not overwhelmed by the habit of treating every thought as important. Lesson 8: Mental chaos ends when you quit fighting against your natural state of calm. Our natural state is one of peace and tranquility, yet we often find ourselves fighting against this inherent calm. The human mind, in its default setting, is remarkably peaceful, much like a still lake on a windless day. The chaos we experience isn't our natural state. It's the result of our resistance to allowing this innate serenity to surface. When we constantly battle against our thoughts or try to force our minds into submission, we create unnecessary turbulence. It's similar to thrashing around in water. The more we fight, the more disturbed the surface becomes. The key to ending mental chaos lies not in struggling against our thoughts, but in recognizing and returning to our fundamental state of calm. This natural state of calm isn't something we need to create or achieve. It's already there waiting beneath the surface of our mental activity. Think of it as the deep quiet ocean floor that remains undisturbed despite the storms raging above. Our task isn't to manufacture peace but stop generating the resistance that obscures it. Many of us have become so accustomed to mental chaos that we've forgotten what our natural state feels like. We mistake the constant buzz of thoughts for normalcy, believing that peace must be actively pursued or constructed. This misconception leads us to pile on more effort, more techniques, and more struggle, all of which actually drive us further from our innate tranquility. The path to ending mental chaos begins with a simple recognition. Fighting against thoughts creates more thoughts. When we resist a worried thought, we generate additional worried thoughts about our resistance. When we battle against anxiety, we create meta-anxiety about our anxiety. This fighting stance keeps us locked in cycles of mental turbulence. Instead of fighting, we can practice gentle acknowledgement. When thoughts arise, we can notice them without entering into combat. This approach aligns with our natural state rather than opposing it. It's like watching clouds pass across the sky. We don't need to chase them away or try to hold them in place. They naturally come and go when we allow them to do so. This gentle approach might feel counterintuitive at first, especially if we're used to actively managing our mental state. However, it's precisely this letting go of control that allows our natural calm to emerge. Just as a muddy glass of water becomes clear when we stop stirring it, our minds settle into clarity when we cease our internal struggling. Our natural state of calm also includes the capacity to handle life's challenges without becoming overwhelmed. When we operate from this base of tranquility, we respond to situations with clarity rather than chaos. We can engage with difficulties without losing our center, much like a deeply rooted tree that bends with strong winds without breaking. The practice of returning to our natural state involves recognizing when we're fighting against ourselves and consciously releasing that resistance. This might mean acknowledging anxious thoughts without trying to eliminate them, accepting temporary discomfort without struggling against it, or allowing emotions to flow through us without attempting to control them. As we consistently practice this approach, we begin to trust our natural state more deeply. We discover that clarity, wisdom, and appropriate action arise more easily from a place of calm than from a state of chaos. The mental peace we've been seeking reveals itself not as something to be achieved through struggle, but as our fundamental nature that emerges when we stop fighting against ourselves. This return to our natural state of calm isn't a one-time achievement, but an ongoing practice of remembering and returning. Each time we notice ourselves fighting against our thoughts or resisting our experience, we have an opportunity to gently shift back into alignment with our inherent tranquility. In this way, mental chaos naturally subsides, replaced by the clear calm awareness that was there all along. Final lesson: true solutions arise from clarity, not from exhausting mental analysis. In our relentless pursuit of solutions, we often fall into the trap of believing that more thinking equals better outcomes. This misconception leads us down endless paths of mental analysis, leaving us exhausted and often no closer to resolution than when we began. The truth is that genuine solutions emerge from mental clarity, that pristine state of mind where wisdom naturally surfaces without forced contemplation. Think of your mind as a glass of muddy water. The more you stir it trying to make it clear, the cloudier it becomes. However, when you allow the glass to rest undisturbed, the sediment naturally settles to the bottom, leaving the water crystal clear. This same principle applies to our thought processes. When we constantly agitate our minds through excessive analysis, we create mental turbidity that obscures our natural wisdom and intuition. Clarity arises when we step back from the compulsive need to figure everything out. It's in these moments of mental spaciousness that we access our deepest insights. Consider how often your best ideas come when you're not actively thinking about a problem, perhaps while taking a shower, walking in nature, or just as you're waking up. These moments of spontaneous clarity occur precisely because your mind isn't engaged in exhaustive analysis. The mind operates most effectively when it's allowed to function in its natural state of flow. Just as a river doesn't need to be told how to reach the ocean, your mind inherently knows how to process information and arrive at solutions. The key is learning to trust this natural intelligence rather than forcing it through endless analytical loops. Practicing mental clarity doesn't mean abandoning thoughtful consideration altogether. Instead, it means approaching problems with a balanced mind that isn't clouded by overthinking. When faced with a challenge, allow yourself to see it clearly without immediately jumping into solution mode. Often, just this clear seeing is enough for the appropriate response to naturally emerge. One powerful way to cultivate clarity is through regular periods of mental stillness. This doesn't necessarily mean formal meditation, though that can be helpful. It might involve simple activities like watching the sunset without analysis, listening to music without mental commentary, or taking a quiet walk without trying to solve problems. These moments of mental rest create the conditions for clarity to naturally arise. When we operate from clarity, we access a different kind of intelligence, one that's more intuitive and holistic than our usual analytical thinking. This intelligence draws from our entire life experience rather than just our active thought processes. It's why we often have that sense of knowing what's right without being able to explain exactly how we know. The path to lasting solutions lies in developing a different relationship with our thinking mind rather than seeing it as a problem-solving machine that needs to run constantly. We can view it as a tool that works best when allowed periods of rest and clarity. This shift in perspective alone can begin to transform how we approach challenges in our lives. Mental clarity isn't a destination, but a natural state that emerges when we stop overwhelming our minds with constant analysis. It's always available to us, though often obscured by our habit of overthinking. By cultivating moments of mental stillness and learning to trust our natural wisdom, we create space for true solutions to emerge effortlessly. The next time you face a challenging situation, experiment with approaching it from a place of clarity rather than analysis. Notice how different it feels to allow solutions to arise naturally rather than forcing them through mental effort. This is the art of living with a clear mind, where solutions flow not from exhaustion but from the natural wisdom that emerges in moments of mental clarity.